Okay, dear Chair, dear audience, welcome to my presentation and the 9-month progress report. The title of my thesis is The Role of Prevention and Early Intervention in Autoinflammatory and Venereal Diseases. My name is István Szondy. I'm a medical doctor and a full-time PhD student at the dermatology clinic. My supervisor is András Bambölgyi, and first, let me share my vision with you, which is fewer complications in autoinflammatory and venereal diseases. To realize this vision, my mission is to introduce prevention and early intervention in the clinical practice to reduce the rate of complications. For this, right now I have 3 ongoing projects, 2 of which are in the field of venerology and 1 in the field of dermatology. In my very first project, which is investigating the efficacy and safety of doxycycline in preventing sexually transmitted diseases, I am conducting a systematic review and the meta-analysis with the help of my team. Sexually transmitted infections pose a global threat as there are more than 1 million new cases of chlamydia, gonorrhea, and syphilis diagnosed every day worldwide, according to WHO. These infections are curable, but they have to be caught early, which can be challenging due to reluctance to seek help or asymptomatic infections. Non-treated patients infect others, while the initially curable disease causes irreversible damages to the body. To prevent this, a novel approach is to administer doxycycline as a prophylaxis. Chlamydia trachomatis and Treponema pallidum are generally sensitive to this agent, while Neisseria gonorrhoeae shows moderate to low susceptibility. In a low dose, it is considered to be safe, so the question remains whether it is effective enough to prevent sexually transmitted infections, which is our goal to assess. For this, we use the PICO framework. The population of interest is sexually active adults, and the intervention is either doxycycline pre-exposure or doxycycline post-exposure prophylaxis, and we compare it to no prophylaxis. Our primary endpoint is the incidence of these STIs, and we have 3 additional secondary outcomes: adverse events, antimicrobial resistance, and adherence to prophylaxis. On this first forest plot, you can see the total number of visits and the number of visits with an STI event in the doxy prophylaxis, and in the control group, as incidence is one of the most appropriate tools to assess the effectiveness of a chemoprophylaxis. We included a total of 6 studies, 4 of which assessed post-exposure prophylaxis. You can see it on the top part of the figure, and 2 studies explored pre-exposure prophylaxis. 5 studies enrolled men who have sex with men and transgender women, and only 1 study, the study by Stewart et al., enrolled cisgender women with male partners. The heterogeneity appeared to be 73%, which is substantial. This could be mainly attributed to the fact that most of the studies were very confident in their findings, resulting in narrow confidence intervals, and most of the studies showed a decrease in the rate of STIs. However, the degree of this reduction was different across studies, and the confidence intervals only partially overlap. Overall, the relative risk was 0.44, which translates to a clinically relevant 56% reduction in the risk of acquiring an STI with the use of doxyprophylaxis, and this was also statistically significant. If we include only the post-exposure studies, the risk ratio stays around the same, and the pre-exposure studies suggest very similar or even higher efficacy. However, due to the low number of studies, we couldn't conduct a separate meta-analysis. And on the next 3 forest plots, you can see the results broken down by infections. For both chlamydia and syphilis, the relative risk was 0.24, meaning an exceptional 76% reduction in the risk of acquiring these STIs. For gonorrhea, we observed a lower 35% reduction in the risk of acquiring this STI. However, this was still unexpectedly high, considering that Neisseria gonorrhoeae generally exhibits low susceptibility to tetracyclines. As for the secondary outcomes, there were no serious adverse events reported in the studies, and only 1 study, the study by Stewart et al., reported poor adherence to prophylaxis, which rendered this method completely ineffective. The major concern around this novel method is the emergence of new antimicrobial resistance as a result of extensive antibiotic use, yet none of the studies have been able to provide clear evidence on this matter. Our study has several strengths and limitations. We included only randomized control trials, and we rigorously adhere to all Cochrane collaboration guidelines, ensuring the highest standards of quality, transparency, and replicability in our results. However, to date, there are only a limited number of studies on this topic, and 2 of the 6 included studies had not yet been published at the time of the assessment. Only the conference abstract with the online webcasts were available. Moreover, we did not have enough studies to conduct a separate meta-analysis on the doxyprep alone. To conclude, our study presented evidence that doxyprep is effective in reducing new cases of syphilis and chlamydia in high-risk MSM populations, with potential effectiveness against gonorrhea, likely influenced by local resistance patterns. Doxyprep suggests similar efficacy. However, due to the low number of studies, any conclusion should be drawn with caution at this point. The thorough assessment of the resistance issue is crucial, as the impact of doxyprep on the resistance will determine its long-term applicability. Based on our results, we advocate for the use of doxyprep in high-risk MSM populations, highlighting emphasizing the importance of careful patient selection. Future studies should investigate doxyprep and doxyprep in cisgender women and in males with female partners to ensure that these findings are also applicable to a broader population. We received our manuscript back with a request for major revision, which we have completed, and yesterday we have submitted the revised version of our manuscript, and now we are waiting for the final decision of the editorial team. And now let me present you my second project, which is investigating the effectiveness of meningococcal vaccine in the prevention of gonorrhea. The growing number of multi-resistant strains of Neisseria gonorrhea is an emerging problem, and despite the attempts, there is still no available vaccination. On the other hand, we have several safe and effective vaccines to prevent meningococcal disease. Neisseria meningitidis, a bacterium from the same genus, has very similar outer membrane components, which could be the basis of cross-protection offered by these vaccines. Based on these, our goal is to determine the effectiveness of OMV-based meningococcal vaccines in the prevention of gonorrhea. For this, we will also use the PICO framework. The population is anybody eligible to receive this meningococcal vaccine. The intervention will be OMV-based meningococcal vaccine, and we compare it to no OMV-based vaccine, which can be no vaccine at all, or other non-OMV containing vaccines as well. The outcome will be the incidence of gonococcal infection, and we hypothesize that OMV-based meningococcal vaccines indeed provide cross-protection against Neisseria gonorrhoeae, with which we could reduce the number of gonorrhea cases. Here you can see my systematic search in the 3 main databases with the subsequent selection process. My co-investigator Alder and I have completed the data extraction and handed it over to the statisticians, and now we are waiting for the final statistical results. And in my third project, which I won't have time to discuss in details, I am investigating the therapeutic options in hidradenitis suppurativa adapted to stages of the disease. To summarize, I have 3 ongoing projects right now, 2 of which are in the field of venerology, novel topics of great interest. I plan to submit finish both of them this summer, and then the focus will shift to my last project, which will be a bigger project based on my preliminary searches. And lastly, I want to thank you for your kind attention with a quote from John Steinbeck: "It is in the nature of man to rise to greatness, if greatness is expected of him." Thank you for your attention.
Congratulations, amazing topic and amazing results. I would like to ask for the first project, what was the follow-up time of these patients after taking the medication? So when did this STI occur?
Okay, so they took the medication through the whole time of the study. Because for doxyprep, the instruction is to take a pill after 24, but maximum 72 hours after condomless sex. But the follow-up for the studies were very similar, fortunately. I believe 4 studies were 12 months long and 2 studies were 10 months long. So.
And it's enough to have just for these diseases to occur?
Yes. We had many. We had 602 diseases actually, so infections. So that's a lot. These are high-risk populations, and these STIs are quite frequent in these populations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question.
Okay, I would like to ask, do you find any guideline regarding doxyprep or PEP?
Yes, since we started this study in autumn, there have many guidelines came out. There are many local guidelines, and even the CDC has a proposed guideline for this. And well, they are different based on the location, but mostly they are advising the consideration of using doxyprep, but at this point only for high-risk MSM.
Yes, and so there, in your study there is doxyprep, so pre-exposure prophylaxis. As far as I know, the patients take the doxycycline every day, 100 milligram, the pre-exposure prophylaxis.
Yes, that's correct.
And is it recommended only cisgender patients or?
Well, to date we had only 2 pilot studies with a low number of cases. So to date, it isn't a recommended intervention, but I think more studies need on this, because in certain scenarios it can be more beneficial compared to doxyprep. And yes, as you mentioned, it involves taking 100 milligram doxycycline every day, so it can't be done for a long period of time. But there are certain situations, for example, especially in these high-risk MSM groups, like a 1-week-long festival where they intend to engage in condomless sex, even chemsex every day. So doxyprep is not feasible every day in subsequent 7 days. So in these situations, for a certain period of time, I think doxyprep would be very beneficial, but more studies are needed.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I would have a question on antibiotic resistance patterns. So any thoughts on that, if that could be an issue for the efficacy of doxyprep and PEP?
Thank you for your question. So none of the studies have been able to provide evidence on emerging resistance. However, it is a concern expressed by numerous researchers. But I mean, for the STIs, for chlamydia and Treponema pallidum is highly unlikely to develop resistance, because doxycycline has been in use for a long time in these diseases, and no studies actually describe resistance against tetracyclines. And for gonorrhea is kind of prone to develop tetracycline resistance, but the clinical significance is highly debatable regarding this, because for gonorrhea, we don't really use tetracyclines. And also, tetracyclines, especially doxycycline, has been used to prevent other diseases for several years now. For example, malaria prophylaxis, or there are studies on Lyme prophylaxis. And in those situations, this emergent resistance wasn't that concerning for the researchers actually. So there are many studies on malaria prophylaxis, and none of these studies mention the emerging resistance as a problem. So I think it has to be monitored during the implementation of this method, but at this point it shouldn't stop us from using this highly effective method in a small high-risk population.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your talk.
Thank you for your questions.